It is a peculiar prototype, and one, as we dealt with before, that KR models have managed to capture really well. Hi there to you, welcome back to the channel. I'm Jennifer Kirk, welcoming you up here to the loft on Weir Yard. Now today we're going to be taking a look at a model that we have actually reviewed before, but the reason for this video is that it's come out in a very striking livery, and you can probably already see it just down there to my left, and it's the KR Models GT3. But in the second run they did something somewhat unusual, and they released it in BR blue and yellow, and this is kind of a what if livery. What if it had been really successful and had lasted long enough to get the BR corporate livery of the late 1960s? It's actually really interesting to see, and secretly I actually prefer this livery, and KR Models have very generously provided us with this to take a good close look at. So that's precisely what we're going to do, in association with Train-O-Matic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. And an extra special thank you goes out to KR Models for providing today's review sample, and also additional support comes from Billy's Replacement Speakers, who handle all of our merchandise, and you can find everything from that merch store down just underneath the video. It's a really great way to pick up something snazzy to wear to one of the exhibitions. But without further ado, let's take a close look at this all new striking livery from KR Models for their GT3. When the GT3 was first released in that really striking brown livery, it really seemed to come out of nowhere. It was a very unusual choice for a first locomotive from an all-new manufacturer, and that could have been a really risky venture. But at the time of recording, KR Models have gone on to scoop a number of awards for that model, and really it puts paid to all of the skepticism that appeared online, because not only did the model appear, but it went down incredibly well with modelers, so much so that quite a few thousand of these models are out there, and they're very close to selling out the second production run. And if that isn't an endorsement of just how good this model is, then I don't know what is. Now, I haven't bothered with the unboxing part of this video because you've already seen that in the other video that I did. Principally, what I want to look at is actually how KR Models have handled this fictitious livery and put it all together on a locomotive that never truly carried this in real life. It's really quite daring. They've gone for a very glossy rendition of that rail blue, so much so in fact that it's very difficult to film it without it catching the glare from the studio lights in here. The model itself is from the same moulds as before, but one thing which the second batch has, which I know was picked up on the first batch, is that the front bogie has been fixed. It's something that I don't think I actually picked up on in the original review, but the actual guard irons on the front were the wrong way round. This has been completely fixed for both versions of the second run model, although KR Models have provided free of charge replacement front bogies to anybody who needed them from the first batch. The rest of the model is really well done, as we saw in the previous video. It's one of the highest scoring models that we received, and so it's little surprise that it went on to actually get a number of awards. Just as before, separating the locomotive and tender is really straightforward. You just pull them apart, and that is so much better than some of the different methods that we've seen from other manufacturers. What you see is exactly how it comes out of the box. It's got a great weight to it, and I really like this glossy finish as well. Now, as everybody knows, BR Rail Blue is really one of my favourite liveries. If you can get it with a tops number, then that's even better. And I suppose if it's the only criticism that I can level at GT3, so I would have loved to have seen a tops number. It's open to debate what the tops number probably would have ended up being. The locomotive itself was actually really quite powerful, and I suspect that maybe it had been something along the lines of a Class 56 before the actual Class 56 ever appeared on the scene. But it's completely moot because as a prototype, whilst it did work, it was just beaten by circumstance and the fact that the technology just didn't quite work out in a rail application in the UK. Over in the US, gas turbines did find more favour, and I guess that's more down to the fact that turbines of this nature use pretty much the same amount of fuel whether they're idling as when they're running. So they're much better suited to the kind of train that's going to go probably thousands of miles without really needing to stop and start, which was something that they would never have done here in the UK. The GT3 also had a propensity to set fire to things like footbridges and signal gantries, so I guess it just really wasn't suited to the UK in any way. But the model is a beautiful what if. I do love the rendition of the small yellow panel on the front, although personally I would have thought that the front end would have been entirely done in yellow. I do like the way that the yellow has been thoughtfully applied, but it does strike me that perhaps it's an odd choice to have picked out the doors and the steps and the side panels in yellow, as there's no prototypes that really followed this way. But on the other hand, it does suit the lines of this locomotive, and what could have been a very daring flop has actually been anything other than that. And at the time of filming, it's pretty close to selling out. One of the things that really does surprise me is the non-fitted versions do seem to be exceptionally popular. And I think at the time of filming, they're pretty much sold out, not just for the BR Rail Blue version, but also for the more prototypically correct brown version too. We do still have the red buffer beam and red front steps, and this, again, it does follow practice that I've seen on some locomotives such as Class 8s and Class 25s too, but it does feel like, I suspect if the GT3 had made it long enough to get rail blue, it might have been picked out slightly differently to this, but quite frankly, we're never going to know. One of the other areas I suspect would have been the entire back would have been yellow, but it's a small point to overlook, and I think that the way that KR models have done it really does make the most of the features of the model to pick them out and actually highlight some of the detail. We've got the BR double arrow there right in the middle of the tender, and it does look a little bit peculiar. We have to tell ourselves, of course, that this is a gas turbine locomotive. It's not a steam locomotive, despite the fact that its entire outlook is very much of the steam age, with a cab here in the middle and what would have been the boiler hanging out the front. Here we've got the gas turbine and the other ancillary equipment. The wheels too are very strikingly set out like a steam locomotive in this 460 wheel arrangement, and with the side rods as well. It is a peculiar prototype, and one, as we dealt with before, that KR models have managed to capture really well. The functionality of the model remains the same, and one of the things as well that I missed in the original review, because it was a loaner and I was quite frightened to break anything, is the ease with which this locomotive can be DCC fitted. If we take the tender, turn it upside down, rest your thumbs against the axle boxes and just push, and there's a click and the entire tender chassis drops out thus. And you can see there we've got a great weight inside, speaker comes factory fitted, and there we've got the ESU lock sound with the GT3 sound file. If you go for one of these that's just the DCC ready, you'll have a blanking plate on here, and it's a really easy step to just prise that out and put any decoder of your choice in place. We've also got the lighting connections, and it really does make a nice, compact, neat, easy to use assembly inside the tender. That connector there which connects between the locomotive and the tender as well, really does make things so simple, and with no real risk of damaging anything by taking the locomotive and tender apart, even accidentally, which is something that can happen with some of the modern locomotives from other manufacturers. It really is a great design. Putting the tender top back on, again, no tools required whatsoever. Line it up and just click into place. And it's a good solid interference fit. You can see there's no risk of it coming apart. On the track, the locomotive is just as sure-footed as the original release. I put it in charge of quite a long rake of Hornby Gresley teak locomotives, and it really doesn't struggle at all. It has to be said that this rake of coaches can provide quite a challenge to some other steam tender locomotives with a similar setup of wheel arrangement, but the weight within this locomotive means that it is more than able to cope with that load without any hint of wheel slip, which is really impressive. All in all, I think this is a great release, and I'm really interested to see some of KR Model's future releases, such has been the success of this livery that they have already announced that the DHP1 and the Leader will be produced in a number of liveries that the real locomotives never actually carried, and it's really pleasing to see that both of those are turning up in a rail blue livery, although Leader was strictly speaking a steam locomotive, so that is quite a wild choice. But according to KR Models, they are actually selling really well to pre-order, and maybe this is something that we're going to see a marked change, with more, strictly speaking, fictional liveries coming through from the manufacturers, but being popular nonetheless. Although it has to be said that some of the other manufacturers are starting to get on board with this, and I'm really looking forward to the Class 17 Clayton coming through from Hellion in a tops liveried example in another rather striking livery that the real locomotive never carried. So I say, long may it continue, and maybe next we'll see something like a Class 28 in RTC blue and red. Never say never. But overall, I'm really glad to be able to take this for a spin on Weir Yard, and so pleased that KR Models put their money where their mouth was and took a punt on this, and have been vindicated all the way. Well, I hope you really enjoyed today's video, and don't forget that I'd love to hear from you. What do you think of this livery? Or indeed, is this something that's actually turned your head and made you think, actually, now I do want one of those GT3s? Or conversely, is this something that you don't agree with? Is this something that you think really doesn't suit this model? I'd love to hear from you too, and you can leave a comment down below. We've also got an affiliate link which takes you to Rails of Sheffield to find your own GT3 in this rather snazzy striking blue and yellow, and they also have the more regular and prototypically correct brown livery too. So do check them out at the link in the description box down below. And if you like this video, don't forget to tickle that like button, share it too, and of course subscribe if you haven't already done so to be the first to know about new videos as and when they go out. But until next time, this is me, Johnny Kirk, saying you take great care of yourself, and I'll catch you then. Happy modelling, bye for now. Today's video is sponsored by Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders designed to be fully compatible with every manufacturer's locomotive. Visit train-o-matic.com to browse the full range and see what they've got suitable for you. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Offshore Allen, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky 107107, George Botterini, Chris Moss, Robert Steers, MD of San Juan Model Company and Grantline Products, Sam Yates, Dale Williams, John N. from NC, NYMRish, Jonathan Foster, Peter, Clifford Ison, Larry W. Grant, NI Railways 4000 class, Ian Coulson, Alan Dickerson, Eddie Papere, Karen Nichol, Medwin Williams, Crossways Point Junction, 3B Rail, and Jennifer Garrett. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.